Good evening and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate they've been looking for. It's been 2 months and 10 days since a new administration took office. Continuing on a campaign slogan that it's the people's time, this new government faced an uphill battle from day one. The economy is seemingly in a slump with threats of a credit rating downgrade. Crime remains at an all-time high with almost 2 murders a week and widespread allegations of corruption almost daily. With all that said, whose time is it really? After 2 months, statutory boards have not been finalized and foreign mission staff from the previous administration are still in place. Tonight, we have a bright and sharp cadre of minds from the Organization for Responsible Governance, ORG, with us. ORG serves as a bridge uniting stakeholders from a diverse cross-section of society in pursuit of a common vision. A thriving Bahamas where accountable and transparent governance allows each individual, business and group a say in decisions that affect our future and equal access to opportunity. ORG is here on the eve of a conference entitled Future of Democracy at the University of the Bahamas. Our topic tonight is our current state of affairs, the economy, crime and corruption, and the new administration. Our guests from ORG are Dr. Ian Strawn, who is a professor at the University of the Bahamas and also the organizer of the conference, and Matt Aubrey, the executive director of ORG and a licensed master social worker. It's all on the record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break.
On the Record is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive. No one does summer like we do. It's just a way of life. Light it up.
Time is now. We own summer. We are alive.
What are you doing?
Calling the bank to order more checks.
Go to epbahamas.com and order your checks from Executive Printers.
Executive Printers. We're the authority in business and personal check printing in the Bahamas. Come in and see one of our specialists or visit us online at epbahamas.com to design and order your checks today.
Welcome back to On the Record. Our current state of affairs, the economy, crime and corruption, and the new administration is our topic for discussion tonight. Dr. Ian Strawn is a professor at the University of the Bahamas, and Matt Aubrey, the executive director of the Organization for Responsible Governance. Gentlemen, welcome to On the Record. It's good to have you here. I want to talk quickly about the Organization for Responsible Governance. What you do?
The Organization for Responsible Governance is a civic not-for-profit organization. We're nonpartisan. I got to say that a couple of times because nobody quite believes us, but we are nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan? That's new.
And we work towards good governance in the Bahamas. We were started in 2015 by a group of Bahamian business folk that really felt like after that reform there were still some initiatives that needed to happen. We really work in three areas right now: accountability, which is accountable governance like the Freedom of Information Act and other types of key legislation. We also work though in economic development, because what you see is that good governance and economic development are very closely linked. It's not always clear to say if one happens the other will, but if you have a vibrant economy you have more opportunity that you're going to have less corruption and less kind of opaqueness, I guess. The final, though, is really the critical part is education. So that as we have a D- GPA, we're going to have a D- economy, we're going to have a D- governance system. So we need to build on our most important natural resource, which is our youth. And so making sure that policies and legislation are put forward to ensure that we can fix some of those inequities that sit in our public education system.
Certainly what you well, you're obviously, the things you're focused on are part of the reason you're here. We thought of this show, we wanted to get a grouping together that would be able to speak to some things really that speak to our current state as a country. But Ian, Dr. Strawn, I want to speak to you now. Why is a group like this so important? I mean, in the past you've had individuals or pockets speaking out, but now you have a group that is focused on good governance. And why is that important to us at this time in our development?
Well, I think where we are as a country, we see certain sticking points in terms of our development, social, economic, political development. And those sticking points, or those entrenched challenges, if you will, require non-political, to some extent non-political activism or engagement to bring solutions to, because the actual political process itself doesn't seem to be giving us the outcomes we want. Well, how can I break that down? Well, you voted in PLP-FNM, but you're getting a consistent outcome in terms of the standard of education, which many people feel is not where it should be, right? So we've got to add something to that equation, right? And I think sometimes that addition is individuals who have vested interest in better outcomes, but who don't want the pressures and the limitations of a 5-year term and getting votes and that sort of thing.
And one of the problems that I see that we have is that we always look to government to solve all of the, I mean,
Yes.
it's sort of it should be the panacea for everything that's wrong in the country. Government should solve, which leaves people really with no individual responsibility.
Sure.
And I think that's a key point, and I think it's something that we all own, right? This is government does a pretty substantial. Has played a substantial role in saying, you know, put us in power and we'll fix the issues. But the truth is, where we are today, the issues we face are so complex that it is not one group, it is not one sector that is going to be successful. And when you look across the globe, the successful modern democracies, they tend to have 3 or 4 sectors that are at play, and government has a critical role. It's supposed to set in structure, it's supposed to devise policy, it's supposed to ensure that things move along. But you have private industry, which is supposed to drive the economy and push forward innovation. You have civil society, which should be a robust force within that to hold not only government accountable and the private sector, but also to help form solutions. And then you have media. And in our pie, if you make it that, we have one really big slice, which is government, and have a bunch of smaller slices. So we need to expand that influence.
Okay, one of the issues that really is facing our country today is nothing new, and continues to be an issue for consecutive and successive governments, is this issue of crime. Almost daily, we're looking at a murder or a follow-up to a murder or investigation or an arraignment. I think when we sat down, we discussed possibly 2 to 3 murders a week on an average we're looking at. Do you think, I mean, from where you sit, are the police and the courts really empowered to do what they need to do to get a handle on the situation? Politicians always come with the plan, but and that seems to be always a temporary fix. The rate will drop for a bit, and then you're back up to the serious crimes. But really, you know, where do the police and the criminal justice system fit into this issue?
We obviously, we're based on a few key things. We look at research, and we try and push towards actionable solutions that engage lots of different stakeholders because we feel that's critical, but we drive it from some data. And when you look across at the research on crime and the result of crime is a manifestation of a lot of issues. So yeah, the criminal justice system, the police, they have a critical role within that to develop an appropriate consequence system, one that doesn't just churn people back worse than they came into it, or appropriately manages those who've offended so egregiously that they are they're either off the streets or that there is some remuneration that can happen. However, when you look at what it is, the key and links to education, when you look at the key links to what's going on in our communities and a sense of focus and productivity, those tend to be just as important. And so I don't think we're giving as much attention to those components. And when we see, I think the biggest challenge we have is that we all work in silos, and the different departments and the different private groups, and with all candor, the Organization for Responsible Governance is one group. We partner with Civil Society Bahamas. We partner with Citizens for Better Bahamas. And this is the first time, so I think we're trying to partner with groups like the UB and that work as a concerted effort. That's going to be the key. I think the answers are there if we start to share information and work towards it. And then each sector can do its appropriate part.
Dr. Strawn, I had some of your colleagues on from UB months ago talking about this sort of issue of crime, even education. And the two are inextricably linked. Yes. The lack of education and this D-average that you speak to and that we all know exists really tied directly to the crime problem that we're having.
Well, I think generally we need to think about, are we having the right kinds of conversations about crime? And we seem to focus narrowly on policing. Not to say that policing isn't important.
But that's always the first thing we go to. Oh, we need more police, we need more resources.
We go to policing, and then we go to the courts. Because we know about baccalogs, we know about the issue of
they're on bail or
and the number of people we focus on the murder rate. One of the things that I want to focus on, and we'll be trying to focus on in the Future of Democracy Conference this weekend, is are there other types of indicators that we should be focusing on which will actually help us have better conversations and help us focus more on our strategies to bring about development and progress. And you mentioned education. When you study the profile of inmates and you see their level of education, then you begin to get a sense that lack of success in high school or junior school is an indicator, a predictor, increases one's probability of being engaged in crime, right? So I mean, the conversation about crime needs to be a holistic one. It focuses on communities that are underserved. Focuses on the quality of the educational experience that they're having, the support the families and communities are having, and obviously on opportunity, economic opportunity as well, right? So if you focus narrowly on that number, the murder count, we all end up feeling paralyzed and say, well, nothing, where are we going? But if we dig deeper and we look at numbers like, well, how many young men are actually finishing with high school diplomas? What sort of enrichment programs are available for young people who are at the formative age in certain types of communities where we know there's a lot of gang activity? In other words, let us study the problem a little more closely and look for performance indicators that we can really, through policy, attack the problem in more than one direction.
So how much time do we honestly spend on looking at the problem? Because when you talk to experts, I've heard this argument and heard this on many occasions that it is linked to these things that you speak of. But how do we move now from that discussion phase, from that research phase, to the problem-solving phase? Right. We sit and we talk a lot, but Rome continues to burn.
So, and I think that's a crucial step. I mean, one of our pushes is we feel like we need stakeholders together, but working towards actionable and sustainable solutions. We can't just have great ideas. Great ideas sit on a shelf and they gather dust. We can't afford that. So we had some research done, and this is just an illustration of that. We had some research done last fall. A gentleman who's worked in education reform internationally, a guy named Scott Hamilton, and he came back and he gave us a few ideas that speak to that. One of our biggest challenges, one of those indicators that is so stark here, is youth unemployment. And we see that youth unemployment's got a link, obviously, to our crime system. But we also see, most recently, the IDB did research to show that just giving jobs doesn't really have an impact on lessening crime. It's meaningful jobs. Those jobs need to mean
Did that message get to the politicians? I'm curious.
The IDB put it out a couple of weeks ago, and we've been talking about it everywhere we go.
I'm just curious as to whether they would have heard that message.
But one of the things that came out of that was a thought to say that we do a lot of work on job readiness here. We have BTVI, we have the National Training Academy Institute. We have, and even a big IDB-funded program on apprenticeships is working. But we're starting this after folks have gotten out of the education system. So one of the ideas that we're putting forward, and we put a concept forward paper to the Ministry of Education on this, is around starting secondary school apprenticeship programs. Not just, here's the smart kids and they go academic, and here's the other kids and they go technical.
Do whatever.
But what you see in Singapore, in Switzerland, and even in states that are struggling in the United States, like Oklahoma and Colorado, is they start pairing a workplace education with the academics that are being contributed, and they pair those two. So what happens is when kids are 15, 16, and 17, when they're developing those pathways into the more illegitimate roads, you're now giving them something clear that shows this is going to be not only meaningful, but there's an end game to this. Not just to be ready for work, but in fact, here's a pathway straight forward.
Dr. Strawn, I need you to get in.
Yeah, I think the issue is, Jerome, the need for us to change the conversation and to focus on really holding policymakers accountable for targeted actions and targeted outcomes and
like you do in business,
and assess performance of those who govern based on their ability to meet those targets. Because I think we should identify these root causes that we know contribute overall to crime, and when we have conversations with ministers of education and youth and culture and so on, and the Prime Minister, whoever else, we've got to be able to say, look, not just, what are we going to do with the murder rate? No. What is specifically being done to address youth employment? Right. What is the plan? What is the target? What is the timeline? What is the expected outcome? And then follow up. I think media has to do that. I think civil society has to do that. And that's whether we're talking about union, church, the business community. I think the conversations need to change and become more specific and more targeted. And then the politician himself gets to know, well, here's how I actually am going to be evaluated. Yeah. And here's the good news. Here's how I can actually show that we're making progress. Yeah. You see? And I think that's where we need to move to.
We're going to go into our first break in just a moment. But moving away from, let's just have this march against this particular issue, but more, here are the solutions that we've come up with, or these are the ideas. Gentlemen, excellent discussion. We're going to take our first break in the show. When we come back, more on the record. Our discussion continues right after this.
Internet speeds for free when you get TV, internet, and phone. Ask for Trio from Rev.
Join the revolution.
ESPN Play is here. Watch your favorite sports on your computer or mobile device, free for all Rev TV subscribers. First, sign up for My Account at cablebahamas.com. It's fast, easy, and free. Next, go to the Google Play Store or the iOS App Store to download and install the ESPN Play app. Then, launch the ESPN Play app, choose Rev, log in with your Rev My Account credentials, hit the launch button, and you're ready to go. You've now got all the hottest games live or on demand with ESPN Play from Rev.
Rev. Join the revolution.
For news that's happening in our country, the best place to turn is Our News.
Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight.
The biggest stories on the best station.
Topping news tonight. The government collected almost...
The Education Minister, the Bahamas Claims Committee, explains how unsecured...
Giving you all sides of the equation to keep you informed.
Well, in other news, police are cracking down on
the claims of Bahamas creditors and home...
Police are on the scene here at a popular hangout.
Statement yesterday, Catholic Archbishop...
Watch Our News weeknights 7:30 and weekends at 7 p.m. only on RTV.
Welcome back to more On the Record. Our topic tonight is our current state of affairs, the economy, crime and corruption, and the new administration. From the University of the Bahamas, Dr. Ian Strawn, as well as from the Organization for Responsible Governance, Matt Aubrey. We're going to turn our attention now to widespread allegations of corruption in this segment. Last week, a former minister was charged before the courts on several counts. Former Cabinet Minister Ken Dorset was charged on several counts of bribery. This opened up a national discussion almost in ways that I'd never seen before in all of my years as a journalist. It brought to light, and from both sides, a new kind of debate. And I want to talk about really what the optics of all of this means to have a former minister now charged within weeks of an election and a change of government.
I think that it's interesting because throughout the Bahamas, everybody talks about that corruption is there.
Yeah.
The Transparency International did a corruption index, and we came out not that bad. And everybody said, well, that can't be true because we see it every day on day-to-day.
Lied on
right.
that.
And the truth is, the data wasn't available for them to be able to judge us in the way that. But anyway, we all know, and everybody speaks to the fact that sometimes it's more important that you got to know a guy, you got to have a way around the system in order to be able to make through the system. But then when something like this happens, it crystallizes and it brings it to the forefront. But it's really endemic of just a much larger issue that we're going to have to deal with. And I think that making sure that there are systems that identify and track people who have done wrong is critical. But there's a culture underneath that supports that. And it starts with the enforcement and following the rule of law from on high, but it trickles down to the day-to-day operations in any of our government offices and that's a level of discussion that's got to happen as well. So we can talk about the folks that have been identified and put out very publicly right now, but it opens up a much larger bottle that we got to get into.
Is that a discussion we're prepared to have?
Well, I think coming out of the election, there is a strong expectation in the Bahamian public that some heads should roll, that they were convinced the PLP was corrupt. In fact, if you remember, of course, when you said that not every PLP, right? There was a cabinet minister who said that politicians were self-dealing. He was in the cabinet when he said that. So clearly, there's an expectation, and that was a part of the FNM's campaign, and so there is this sense of almost excitement and happiness, approval, I think, for what the government is doing. On the other hand, there are those of us who are cautious and wondering, is this really all theater? Is this really are you just going to embarrass people, score political points? Are you really doing your homework and investigating, or are you just ruining people's reputations just to score political points? On the other hand, what I want to know as a citizen is, what are your plans for your governance to actually create the mechanisms that prevent these types of abuses going forward?
Well, the Prime Minister has said that, I think just this week he said that he doesn't expect, if I can get his quote here, he said that he doesn't expect that
his ministers will be involved in any kind of activity. Well, that's nice that he expects that. But what are you doing to ensure that if they are, they will face, consequences? And furthermore, I mean, his first speech in the Parliament was pretty moving. He talked about his own encounters with a politician trying to basically shake him down or force his way into an investment he was trying to start. And it was a very powerful story. And it convinced me that this is something that he does in fact care about. But we need to see that you do things, even the justices, even in the process, that those who are being accused also are allowed due process, but that you do your homework and you also, in fact, make sure that conflict of interest is addressed, that the issues of the Public Disclosure Act are addressed, that the Public Disclosure Commission is actually given the power it should have. And by the way, I have to say, for the first time I know the name of the person who's in charge of the Public Disclosure Commission. So, and this law has been around since 1976. And so, when you allow politicians to regulate themselves, this is what you have. You need to deal with the Public Accounts Committee. You need to make sure there's real oversight. In some cases, citizen oversight. Like the concern with the FOI, is that you're just going to give a political appointee this job. So there are a whole number of things that need to be done. The OAS has come in and looked at our issues of anti-corruption and made recommendations. I just think this is an historic opportunity for this government, if it's serious, to create mechanisms that will satisfy the public, that it is committed to eradicating as much as possible corruption from public life, and we expect that.
And there are systems, there are established systems, both in the region and internationally, of countries that have really worked to address and minimize the likelihood of corruption, because that's really what it is. I mean, we focus a lot on let's catch folks that have gone wrong, but more importantly, you want to make sure that there are systems in place that are going to make this much more open, much more transparent. We need laws. I mean, some of our laws in existence, we've already done some benchmarking on those, and there are some good things that have to follow through and make sure that enforcement is in place, but there's others that need to be tightened up. That public disclosure law needs to be tightened up. We need a whistleblowers law. We need to ensure that people are incentivized to be able to call things out when they see them. Right now, that's not the case.
Campaign finance reform, somebody spoke to the need for that this week as well.
And this is what brings us back to the first question you asked: why do you need civil society organizations? Right. Because at the end of the day, the Free National Movement won an election, and in my view, and my belief is, they won it doing it the way you win elections. And that's without transparency. Who funded them? Right? You say you're about transparency, we don't know who funded you.
So who do you now have to pay?
Precisely.
That you're in
and so
office,
the point is, you need folks in civil society to actually support the effort at reform. Because at the end of the day, you have an organization with people who are old guard and people who want things to stay the same, and you're really going to create laws and put in mechanisms that make it hard to do what they've always done. But it's in the public good to do it. And so I guess, in a sense, you need citizen advocacy groups, organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, like the church and others, to stand shoulder to shoulder with the elements within these political organizations that want to see them become more honest, to work together. Because alone, I don't think the PLP changes without.
That's later on in the discussion. Two things. A lot of these organizations and the people who head these organizations, you talk about chamber, you talk about church, and I'm not speaking to any individual, but you have individuals who have had these organizations over the years who are in bed with the politicians, whether it's politically or from a business aspect.
So that's the critical point there, is civil society should not be reflective. I mean, anytime a small group is making decisions for a larger group, you're going to go wrong. You need the influx and the input of folks at the grassroots level. So part of our civil society effort is not just to push for these types of reforms, not just to be involved in advocacy and developing legislation, but also to ensure that the citizenry gets involved. When we go as a group and we speak to an elected official or somebody that's in a ministry, that definitely speaks to the fact that we represent a group. But when you can activate and empower people in the constituencies, those people who are directly dealing with it, to be able to come forward and be advocates, and you can start to grow that group, it's an incredible power and it's an incredible force. And it's the critical component, though, to ensuring that level of transparency. When the person who is dealing with the issue that I'm afraid to go outside of my house today, I'm afraid they're going to cut off my electricity, I don't know where my meal's coming next week, when they can realize that my involvement, not just showing up to vote, but my involvement ongoingly can be important, that's where we've got to get
I really want to emphasize this point, though, about why the political establishment needs citizens to help bring about reform. Hubert Ingram is a perfect example. This gentleman was instrumental in the F&M victory. And he came to the platform and brought powerful disclosures and made accusations of corruption from the Ministry of Finance and all the rest of it. This is the same gentleman who gets up at Rotary and says, people don't need to go to jail. You voted them out, that's good enough. That's enough punishment. Hold on, you got us worked up. You convinced us people. You convinced us people stealing. You don't want to introduce cookie jar to public discourse. Don't then tell me once I vote them out, it's all good. No, it's not all good. They took taxpayers' money. And so again, you can't do this and not follow through. And that's where the citizens need to say, no. Follow through. Go all the way. And if some of your own have to fall, well, so be it.
Yeah, be that as it may.
You don't want to set the chips forward.
Yeah. Second point, you see a former minister now in handcuffs going to court. What message, or does that now send a message to the boy from over the hill who broke into my house, stole my TV, my computer, the police kicked down his door, put their knee in his back? Take him to court. Not that what he did isn't wrong.
I hear you.
But now does that begin to send a different message that, hey, we are all held accountable, not just me as the poor black boy from over the hill who thieved some things or did some things.
And that's
now.
important because
is that now sending a different message?
It does, because you want us to believe in the system, don't you? And part of the rationalization for committing certain crimes is, who's looking out for me? Right. The system ain't working for me. Look at what the guy at the top is doing. So why shouldn't I take as well, right?
Right.
But of course, on the other hand, they've also put people in cuffs who didn't do anything wrong. Right? That happened days after the election too. So, they've got to do it the right way. But yes, I think we need to send a strong message that there are consequences. And we need to create a culture that says, there is no impunity. You don't get to do whatever you want and not face any consequences. And that trickles down, because I believe that violence in the streets has a direct connection to corruption in high places.
Yeah, I share the same view, that people look and see the politicians or those connected to politics or those connected to people in high places get caught with marijuana in the car and are set free, or steal money from the bank and nothing happens.
And more than that, because we don't have transparency in terms of things like campaign financing, it is very possible for the criminal underworld to have very strong connections to the political world and fund campaigns and own politicians, because you don't know where the money is coming from. It could be coming from a drug dealer or someone who traffics in humans or who money launders. You don't know.
Right.
You really don't know. One
of the things that a lot of people had an issue with really was the first referendum, then opinion poll on gaming, which then, despite the no vote, still went ahead, was legalized, come into force.
Yes.
And there was all these questions of, were these businesses funding these election campaigns in order for their own self-preservation?
And both Hubert Ingram and Perry Christie are on the record as saying that candidates in that election received funds from Numbers Men when Numbers was illegal.
Right.
That's a public record.
And that's the thing here is that you talk about, if you're going to make reform, or if you're going to go back and start to say, hey, this needs to happen with public disclosure. They went back and they're looking back at public disclosure over the last 5 years. But it hadn't been disclosed for the 5 years prior to that.
Let's look at it over 20 years.
So if you're going to look at keeping people up to speed or trying to address this issue, you have to realize this is not just sitting in one administration. It's going back and it's going back. And we've got to look at consistency, we've got to look at transparency, and more importantly, sustainability. That's what will show this out.
The Prime Minister's on record, as well as the Minister of National Security, saying that this is not a witch hunt. But if you are keeping these investigations or keeping this view within that 5-year period, the past 5 years, on the very surface of it, it looks like a witch hunt against the former administration.
I think you have to look at twofold. Again, how much energy do we put on, let's try and set our house right now, and will we set ourselves up going so that the system's going to be forward? And I think that as they look, obviously the most immediate is going to be there, but it shouldn't be that that's the only window that they're looking at if they're truly going to do this, because it's going to be these issues that we're going to have to address and understand if we're going to come up with systems that are going to be able to negotiate it. I mean, there are laws in place all over the world that are great laws and enforcement doesn't happen. And we need to deal with this issue of how do we enforce things consistently? How does rule of law apply to those at the top, those in the middle, those at the bottom of the economic scale in a fair and just way?
And to be completely, just looking at it from a political science point of view, it is strategically advantageous for a government that is struggling to figure out what is the move to achieve economic growth, what's the move to fix any number of problems, to draw people's attention to something where some low-hanging fruit, and attacking.
It makes good political sense.
Yeah,
gentlemen, we are at the midway point in our show. We've got to take a break. Tonight we're discussing our current state of affairs. We've looked at crime and corruption. When we come back, we're going to look at the economy, and further on down in the show, looking at the new administration as a whole. Stay with us. We are back on the record right after this.
This is us. We all live here. And while we don't think of ourselves as numbers, in the grand scheme of things, numbers are part of who we are. Like your phone number, for instance. That's why at Alive we believe you should keep your number when you switch. Go in store today and ask an Alive switch angel. They'll make it real simple for you. We are alive.
Speeds for free when you get TV, internet, and phone. Ask for Trio from Rev.
Join the revolution.
We are now in a new political era, a new prime minister, government, and opposition. What are the new challenges, and what role will the Bahamian people play in this new era of governance? Join me, your host Jerome Sawyer, each week for On the Record as we examine the latest political news and views. That's On the Record, airing every Thursday at 8 p.m. on cable channel 212. See you then. Welcome to the second half of tonight's episode of On the Record. Our topic, our current state of affairs, the economy, crime and corruption, and the new administration. We continue our discussions with our guests, Dr. Ian Strawn and Matt Aubrey. Gentlemen, I want to talk about the economy now. Really something that I breathe deeply. That has really been grabbing headlines since this new administration took office. Government borrowing some $320 billion, public asking why, lots of questions about what was done under the last administration again, and these threats now by these international agencies with another possible downgrade has affected the mood of the people, I find, in some ways. But really how, all of this discussion about all this gloom and doom about the economy, how is that really affecting us?
Well, I mean, if you look at a country's economic health, it's critical. It's critical in terms of our development. You can look at one of our nearest neighbors and look at Jamaica, and I mean, they hit the economic bottom. I mean, and what we're looking at here is we're on that downward slope. And I think what has come out as part of the conversation most recently, at least, has put it on people's agenda to be paying attention, that this now means something, that we get into things like the GDP. What does that really mean? Why does national debt matter? What do we need to do about it? Because I think we're getting close to that precipice, and if we get to the point where the economy is so bad, we continue to get these downgrades, and our dollar is devalued, it's a whole different conversation. And I think we need to bring all the resources we have together at this point, because that's critical. The fact that we're in a place where, in order just to meet our basic requirements, we've got to take on such an additional amount of debt, it tells you that there's going to be some game-changing decisions happening pretty soon. And I think that no matter what happens, it's going to hurt for us for a while. And so we need to know that there's going to be a long-term plan that gets us out of this, instead of just further decline.
When you look at, get right down into, we're borrowing money to pay salaries.
Yes, there was an interesting article recently with James Smith, and he talks about that we saw this coming.
Right.
You know, we knew a decade before we introduced VAT that we needed something to deal with the revenue shortfall we were going to face. And the fact is that governments haven't been disciplined. They haven't been disciplined in terms of how they manage public resources. There is a high level of waste. It's clear. There's bloat in some places, and of course, you don't have enough manpower in other areas. That's true. I don't deny that. And so one of the hard things that since 2008 we haven't been prepared to do is really look at the civil service and really look at government spending, look at the pension that no one contributes to, but they're entitled to. Look at these issues. And corruption does play a serious part in the economic performance of a country. It discourages and turns off investors. Fred Smith has been writing about the problem of cabinet having to approve every major foreign investment rather than professionals, and the impact that has. So there are issues with how our model and how it works and doesn't work that we have to deal with. And of course, we just had an election, but this really wasn't what we wanted to talk about, and these really weren't the questions we were asking. And so now the new government is in power, and they've got to figure it out. But the conversations before the election weren't really helping them sharpen their ideas about what they should be doing and where they should go, and didn't help the public understand what the real choices are, so that we can also hold them accountable. And so we're really at a disadvantage. And I think, where's the innovation going to come from? Because it needs to come. I'm not an economist, but it seems to me that if you want people to invest, you get out of their way and you let them invest. You incentivize them. You don't tax them. And so, but I think we're at this moment where, because of VAT, the public is more sensitive and more concerned about what you do with tax dollars. That's a good thing. VAT has made life more miserable for us. Yes,
of us.
There's no doubt. But I actually think it has helped the Bahamian people mature.
Really?
In terms of their desire for accountability and for good stewardship.
We've never really had this level of taxation. I mean, it's your property
direct taxation.
Direct property tax that you avoid. You lie to customs about what you bought coming in, so you don't pay your custom duties.
You can't duck VAT.
Yeah, but VAT is literally on everything that you do and purchase.
But it would be an example of, again, you got to do all the things that you're supposed to do to make something happen. So when VAT reform was put in, the recommendation, one of the critical recommendations that came from the folks from New Zealand on doing it with this model, was that you needed to have a Freedom of Information Act, because people needed to be able the right to say, okay, where is that money going? Ensure that it's being used for the purpose it was being gathered. And a Fiscal Responsibility Act, so that there was a cap on what government spending was, so that you could use that money to ensure that you're paying down your national debt. Neither of those to date has yet happened. So the Freedom of Information Act that was passed is still yet largely unenacted, and the Fiscal Responsibility Act, or some kind of fiscal responsibility legislation, is not yet happened either. So we're talking about it, and hopefully it happens in the fall, but that has led to this kind of continued balloon of government spending. There's no provisions really to mandate let's not do it or let's put it forward.
And I'm concerned that the F&M they seem a little gun shy to do anything too bold and different. And they're kind of holding the line, and that's not going to get us where we need to go. And I think the other issue is too, what are you going to do about the abuses that like? For instance, they're focusing heavily on the January to May abuses in terms of approvals of contracts and spending. That happens every 5 years.
Yeah.
And maybe at a larger scale this time than previous, but I don't know that because I don't have the data. You're not sharing it with me.
But two structural changes are you don't put your election right when your budget's going to move, and you move to the accrual.
But one of the things we're doing in the
So
Freedom
you
of
understand
Information
what that looks.
conference this weekend, not Freedom of Information, the Future of Democracy, is looking at procurement. How do we actually deal with all the process of awarding contracts to people, and is it transparent? Is it fair?
Well, it's obviously not when you have now all of these questions of who was awarded the contract. Were they qualified to get the contract? Was there an accounting of the money spent and things of that nature, which have brought us to this point of now a former minister before the courts and rumors of others that could be hauled before the courts having to do with this issue. But one of the things having to do with the economy that I do want us to talk about and you mentioned it, that the government seems to be a little gun shy on is this issue of austerity. And what do we do now to put a cap on spending and cut back and do the things that are necessary that are done in ordinary business? If you are running a business and you are in the red, you're in a cost run overrun situation, there are some things that you do now to bring those costs back in line. But is a government prepared to do that when you have to face an election 5 years down the line?
Well, it's interesting, I mean, I remember when the PLP came in, they were talking about cutting budgets successively. This is what Al-Qaeda is talking about, ironically, right? And then, but look at what they ended up actually doing, increasing the debt so significantly. It must be addressed. It must be addressed in terms of how they look at not just the civil service, the complement of hires, but also in terms of procurement, because so many of these projects, they seem inflated in terms of what they end up costing the Bahamian people.
Inflated, and then the money's not used properly.
Yeah, it's also
wasted.
It's a recurrent cost of those staff, though. That's the thing.
Yes.
Once you bring that on, now you've got that ongoingly, and every year it's going to be that.
But also
that
don't forget the opportunity that was squandered with VAT, which exceeded your expectations.
Yes. Yeah, from the
that
very
you
beginning.
squandered with VAT to try and deal with some of the fiscal issues, and I have yet to hear a single statement. Correct me if I'm wrong, that outlines clearly how the F&M plans to deal with value-added tax.
Yeah.
I haven't heard a single word.
Maybe it's coming. We'll keep listening. This week, the Prime Minister and Cabinet toured the Bahama project. They expect it to be fully open in a few months. 2,100 employees there, 100 of them are expats, 4,000 expected by the end of the year. I looked at that, I paid close attention, and I thought, is this more of the same, where we're pushing our people into making this project now the savior, trying to employ thousands of people to give them jobs. And so much teetering still on this major project. Again, to your point too, Dr. Strong, I don't see a lot of push into, okay, well, we have this project, and how are we going to grow the economy by creating other offshoot businesses or empowering people to do more in and around this project?
And I think, what's interesting is if you look at, I think the impact that they estimate with Baha Mars, it's going to move the GDP up at like 1%. And in order for us to be stable, I think we need to be up like 6%. So you would need 6 other Baha Mars to be able to actually depend on that. And that's unrealistic. So I think one thing, and I think you've got to look at how you manage both government costs, and you have to look at some of these programs that we have, these social programs, and really be clear about what's the output, what's the input, what's the return on investment, because if we're gonna get through this, there are gonna be some significant cuts that have to happen. And we can't just push forward with what we thought was gonna happen, because things are different.
Yeah.
But then simultaneously, we need to start to foster those Bahamian businesses. When you talk about tourism, we need to find that avenue so that in our main industry, that we can see we can interrupt and get access into the supply chain.
Gentlemen, we have to take a quick break. We're going to pick up the discussion right there, and I do, of course, want to talk about the Future Democracy Conference. All of that on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
Get faster internet speeds for free when you get TV, internet, and phone. Ask for Trio from Rev.
Rev, join the revolution.
Shooting last night claims the life of a young woman.
Is being urged to evacuate as soon as possible. That story coming up.
Inside the huddle, everybody, Al Marcellus.
Police officer behind bars today. Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Welcome back. This is the final segment of this episode. We're currently talking about our current state of affairs, the economy, crime and corruption, and the new administration. We are soon going to be hitting the 100-day mark of the new FNM government led by Prime Minister Hubert Minnis. What are going to be, or what should be, some of the key performance indicators of this government in the, in this first 100 days, which is, very monumental in the life of a government, because that's when people really begin to examine the work of the government. Ian, I'm going to start with you. From your perspective, what are some of the things that, or some of the milestones, if any, the government should be hitting?
Well, I want to see, and I think we should all want to see, what their economic plan is, right? You can't necessarily get results in 100 days, but I should know that you have a plan, or that you're going to put the team together to create the plan. I think as Prime Minister, there's no one who wouldn't take your call, either here or anyone who loves the Bahamas anywhere in the world. And I think if you don't have the expertise resident in the cabinet, that's okay. You can find the expertise, and you need to find the expertise, because I refuse to believe that there are not strategies which we can employ. We need to look at our tax regime. We need to look at how we facilitate investment, domestic and otherwise. We need to look at how we could grow small business. We need to look at how we could increase trade. Those are the type of things that you have to do. And I think that our government needs to be aggressive about devising an economic strategy to bring growth, because that is what will reduce the suffering, it will reduce crime, it will create opportunity. And I think that's number one. That I haven't seen that we need to see is an economic strategy. And of course, that strategy is going to have to address spending. It's going to have to address how it is you manage the resources and how you tighten your belt and clean up processes where there's waste and inefficiency. So that would be the big thing for me.
Mark?
I think Dr. Strawn hit a number of those, and I think although we've been cautiously optimistic because we feel like we've been hearing some of the right words, we've been hearing about accountability, we've been hearing about transparency, we've been hearing about reform and limiting government spending, but now's the time we want to see that actualized, where we would see the budget that they inherited. If you went line by line through that budget, there were some cuts and some values, but nothing substantially that would show that even what you would say would happen in the course of this year. So I take that to mean that this is going to be that critical planning year, and where the indicators that we look to are going to be those key pieces of legislation, and the process. A number of civil society groups have put forward an idea around public consultation, to standardize public consultation. The engagement of the citizenry happens sporadically and has always through our history. So do we have a system in place like other Commonwealth places where the green paper is issued, where there's an actual standing, easy to access public forum or online tool that can gather information, and a white paper that's disseminated before legislation might be tabled? If that starts to happen, and then what we go forward is going to be inclusive of everything that Dr. Strawn talks about. We're not going to be leaving stuff on the table or reacting once something's put out when it's not up to our measure.
Something that we have not addressed, and that is a key part of good governance, is a strong opposition. The opposition right now, 4 members within the House of Assembly, and going through some issues of their own. Former PLP Minister Loftus Roker just this week called on the party again to repent or risk being destroyed. Very critical of the past administration, even calls from former MP Philip Galanis for Chairman Bradley Roberts to step down. So while you've got sort of the government over here trying to run the country, you have a opposition that's seemingly disintegrating in some aspects that cannot be healthy for democracy.
Well, actually, I think this is it's a golden moment opportunity for the PLP to really reinvent itself to some extent. Not that it needs to be completely ashamed of its whole legacy, because it is the founding party, I guess you could say. But a lot of the things that they need to do, they were told they should have done at the last time they lost, which is make an example. Get rid of some of the bad apples. Yes, they were told us before, they just won't do it, right? So they have this moment, and I hope they make the right choice. They do have in Cooper and in others who perhaps haven't had the frontline experience yet, they know how to attract talent. The question is, are they prepared to actually come back to the Bahamian people with integrity, with credibility? And that means you have to let some people go.
Yeah.
Roberts should have resigned on election night. He should have resigned on election night. This is a fact. So I understand that you need to have some of the old guard, some people with some institutional memory to help the institution, to help the party move forward. But the PLP needs to change. And if they don't change, yes, they could be on the outside for quite a while. And we do need a strong opposition. We didn't have a strong opposition in the last 5 years. And look at all the craziness the PLP got away with.
Yeah. The problems that existed within the FNM.
Yes.
I mean, truth be told, the party really didn't get its act together until just before the election.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. And I would go back to why you need a strong opposition. You need a strong opposition to ensure that all matters are being discussed, that it's not just one-sided or one set of facts or one set of perspectives is being considered. So what the opportunity on both sides, both parties have right now, is to kind of recreate themselves. I think it's been widely stated that the election results were much more fostered about people wanting to get out one party versus necessarily saying this is the party that will carry us forward.
The PLP.
So now the ruling party has the opportunity to put a structure in place to say, well, this is what that's going to be. But more importantly, the opposition shouldn't be thinking about its limits of 4 people in Parliament, but much more, how do you activate your entire base?
Yeah.
When we were talking about the Freedom of Information Act last year, and you saw the public consultation efforts, and there were 15 people in a room for all of Nassau to listen and learn about a very good and comprehensive presentation on freedom of information, what that told you is neither party said, let's get our people and say, hey, folks, you need to be there because this matters to you.
But you know what it speaks to? We need more professionalism in politics. There's a level of amateurism to it that's plagued us.
And mob mentality.
Yeah, and there's theatrics and amateurism.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, historically, oppositions have never stepped forward with alternatives, have never stepped forward and said, actually, no, this, we've done the research. Our think tank has come up with this, and this is actually where we should be going with the economy. And what you're doing is not going to work. The level of preparation, the level of forethought and strategy, and just the general, I don't know how else to put it. There's just a slackness to the way we do opposition, and I hate to say it, the way we do government.
And I think it translates in once they get into government as well. I mean,
and I like how people say anything buck up go, and that's how we're conducting ourselves, and we're suffering because of it.
And the emphasis can't be once it hits Parliament. It has to be
No,
all that time
what
before.
are you doing for 5 years?
One of the interesting things, though, in this election, you would have saw the millennials really emerge as that force, that those new and young voters really helped to bring that sweeping change. And from where I sit, this is a generation that's very intolerant.
Yeah.
That will not put up or sit by and take the things that our grandparents, parents, and even that we took. Very intolerant and very impatient. I'm just curious as to how I think that's going to play out now.
I hope they stay that way. I hope that they remain impatient. I've been saying there's no honeymoon for the Minnis administration. I don't think that he's going to get one. But I think that you talk about the young people. The PLP, for instance, needs to discover their base is dwindled. They've got to figure out how to engage young people. They got to figure out how to actually get young people to believe in the PLP. That's just them. But I think generally it augurs well for our country. That we have social media as a tool, because I think it really gives lots of people a voice and empowers people. And I think that our citizenry is in a good place to grow and mature and hold governments accountable. I think you still have that danger of appealing to people's lower instincts, but I think generally speaking, we have a great opportunity now to demand better performance. from our representatives.
But I think for the youth, I mean, the implication of the fact that we have almost 30% youth unemployment puts a lot of emphasis on one group to be able to respond when the basic necessities are not being provided to them. Yeah. We're not mandating that civic education is a part of their curriculum. We're doing a grassroots effort going out to churches and town halls and communities doing something called freedom schools that are teaching the basics of what is the Westminster system, how does Parliament work, what is your role in that, not just to vote in terms of how to involve, and giving people a chance to practice even how would you articulate your interests and concerns.
People
to
don't
an
understand
MP.
how government works.
It's the basic one.
Yeah.
If we're going to say we're passing legislature and we're holding that the elected officials are supposed to be out there representing their constituencies, we also need to support and fight that really well-substantiated feeling of disenfranchisement and disassociation, because so many people have that sense of my voice isn't going to matter, why would I even be involved? Now we have an opportunity where people say, well, maybe it will. We have to show and help people grow to say, this is how we can arm you to be as effective a citizen as possible.
Gentlemen, at the very top of the show, I introduced the topic, but also spoke as to why you are here. The Future of Democracy Conference is going to be taking place. We're here on the eve of that. I want you to tell us a little bit about that and who are really what was the impetus for it, or what is the impetus for it, and who are some of the key personalities who will be there.
Well, the School of Social Sciences and English teaming up to bring the second Future of Democracy Conference. It will be at the Harry Moore Library all day Friday and Saturday of this week. And it's really an opportunity for us as a society, for ordinary Bahamians, to come and talk about our systems, our laws, and how they can better serve us. Government exists to deliver public goods. In other words, to provide for services that the private sector can't. To make sure we have good roads and schools and health care for everyone, and to protect citizens, etc. Well, we know we can do better, but we want to focus on how we as citizens can help government and collaborate with government, and maybe also use our own initiative to create change. And so we partner with ORG, we're partnering with others in the society who want to see this happen, and we're excited. We're bringing his name is Zanul Hussain. He's chairman of the Integrity Commission of Trinidad and Tobago. He's our keynote speaker. He speaks tomorrow evening about the work of the Integrity Commission, because we think it's important to look at the region and how we're all trying to deal with the issue of corruption and integrity as a value we want to promote, not just in representatives, but in citizens as well, right? We're talking about this Disclosure Act. We're talking about constitutional reform, gender equality. We have panels on, we have presenters who are talking about how we can get young people more involved and more engaged.
Good idea.
I am having a workshop on creating a people's parliament, a virtual tool basically for average citizens to propose solutions, to ask questions of their representatives, to just share their ideas about how we can move things forward. So the Democracy Conference, you can find out more about it at Democracy 242 or the University of Bahamas page, or Out the Box page. And we invite people to come. We'll be live streaming. Excellent. But also it's free for the public. We want people to come out and participate. Okay. Matthew's presenting as well, and I'm presenting, yeah.
But I think it is crucial, and I would really put this out to everybody who's watching, that this is one of those rare opportunities to start to look and learn and be a part of that conversation. There's not that many forums out there, and what Dr. Strawn and the university have done is really brought together academics, community activists, interested citizens, people who've been on the other side, in the government side, that can speak to it, and given a forum where we can not only talk about this, analyze it, look at what's being done. This is not necessarily about what are the problems. This is about what are the possible solutions, and then creating the workshop, which is an extremely exciting opportunity, that if you have a choice of something to do on Saturday, this is worth your time. Come and see what's being talked about. Get your voice heard. Put your ideas to rest, and get some interesting feedback on that and carry it forward, because there will be steps going forward to make sure that people do understand and hear this, and it can really be the start of a further movement.
And I would just say, if you're concerned about the air quality on this island and about what we do with waste, if you're concerned about how we could get have better outcomes in terms of education, if you're concerned about accountability and transparency, if you're concerned about fairness in elections.
This is the place for you to
Yeah, it's a place to come
Gentlemen,
on.
we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining me this evening on this show. The Future of Democracy Conference, Harry B. Moore Library on the university's campus, Friday and Saturday.
Yes.
It's free.
Yes.
So we encourage people to go out and become a part of the discussion and certainly have your say and become a part of this whole issue of governance. Gentlemen, Ian Strawn, Professor of University of the Bahamas, thank you so very much. Matt Aubrey, Executive Director, Organization for Responsible Governance. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on tonight and to join us on this discussion, and hopefully we'll get some more people out to your event this weekend. Thank you very much. Special thanks to my guests, also to my producer, technical staff, and of course you, the audience, for watching us. Be sure and join us for more On the Record. We'll be here next week, same time, same channel. Once again, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time.